think banks are designed to help you grow your money? That's the story most people believe. But the reality is very different. Because the moment you deposit money into a bank, you're no longer the one using it. The bank is. They take your money, combine it with others, and turn it into something far more powerful. Loans, investments, cash-flowing assets. And while you earn almost nothing, they earn everything. Now here's where it gets interesting. The wealthy understand this system better than anyone else. And instead of being on the outside of it, they position themselves inside it. They don't use banks like storage. They use banks like engines that produce money. So what's the difference? It starts with one simple shift. The average person saves money first, then spends it. The wealthy acquire assets first, then borrow against them. That changes everything. Because when you have assets, banks don't see you the same way. They don't see risk. They see opportunity. And that's when they offer something most people never truly access. Cheap capital, low interest money, flexible credit, large liquidity. Now think about this carefully. Instead of waiting 10 years to afford something, the wealthy access it immediately using borrowed money. But they don't borrow randomly, they borrow strategically. They use that money to buy more assets that generate income. So now, instead of paying out of pocket, their investments are paying for the debt. And this is where the system starts to compound, because they're not just using money. They're reusing it over and over again. An asset increases in value. They borrow against it, use that money to acquire another asset, which produces more income, which increases their borrowing power again. It becomes a loop, a controlled loop. And inside that loop, wealth starts to accelerate. Now here's something most people completely miss. The wealthy rarely sell their assets. Why? Because selling triggers taxes and stops the growth. Instead, they borrow. They keep the asset, keep the appreciation, and still access the cash. So they stay invested while staying liquid. That's a completely different game. And it gets even more powerful because the cost of borrowing is often lower than the return they generate. They might borrow at 3%, but earn 8%, 10%, sometimes more. That difference? That's profit. That's how the bank quietly becomes part of their wealth machine. So while most people are trying to eliminate debt, the wealthy are engineering it, designing it in a way that produces income instead of consuming it. And once you see this, your perspective shifts. Debt is no longer something to fear. It becomes something to understand, something to control, something to use. Because the truth is, banks are not against you. But they are not automatically for you either. They simply respond to structure, and the wealthy give them exactly what they want: security, assets, predictability. In return, they gain access to one of the most powerful forces in finance: leverage. And leverage, when used correctly, doesn't just grow money, it multiplies it. The wealthy build relationships, negotiate terms, move capital where it's treated best, and create competition between lenders, which means better rates, better access, and more control. At that level, the bank is no longer in charge. They are. And that's the moment you stop playing small, stop thinking in terms of saving, and start scaling, directing money, multiplying it, and turning the system into your advantage.